for this exercise, what we are going to do is to build an axonometry of our terrain, showing at different levels, different types of information of our terrain. So this file is available in the website. It already has our roads cleared and simplified and closed, because what we know is that the AutoCAD files that we usually receive don't have the what seems to be a continuous line closed, and there might be some lines juxtaposed. And so we did a cleanup of the file for the main roads, as it is going to be specific information that we'll want to put in a specific level of our axonometry. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to change the view to an isometric one, as we know that usually the axonometries are built like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maintain this perspective view. I'm going to change to one of the other views and set it as an isometric one. So I'm going to change to the right view. And what I can do, if I come here to the view label, I can right-click it, and I have an option which is set view, where I can change the view for this specific window. And if I come down here, I have an isometric option. And then I can set any orientation that I want. In this case, I'll put southeast as my orientation, and it will change it like this, but you'll still be able, obviously, to rotate it and to move your view. But so now it's set in this isometric view that we'll want for our axonometry. So the first level of our axonometry, so down here, where we have our main roads, we'll live with the counter lines and the terrain. So it can be something like this. So we'll have our terrain and the counter lines for the terrain. In our second level, what we'll put will be the green areas. For example, as it is one major component of this terrain, one very important component, and so we'll put it, for example, in a second level. We could grab the original geometries for the green areas and project them onto our terrain surface. But if you remember from a previous exercise, the exercise where we put the trees onto our terrain, in the beginning of that code, we had the green areas already adapted to our terrain. So we're going to grab those to be a bit quicker. So I'm going to open Grasshopper, and I'm going to open the code, the Grasshopper code for that exercise. So in this case, I have the base code. If you don't have it, you can grab the final code for that exercise, because if you remember, we had these elements in the beginning, which were the areas indicated as green areas in the original file, already adapted to the terrain. So first, what I'm going to do is to create a layer in Grasshopper to put those areas in. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call them, for example, green areas 3D, so that I know exactly what's in there. So now I'll come back to Grasshopper, and I'm going to bake these two areas. So I'm going to select this one, right-click it, and do bake, and select the layer that I've just created. Now the second element, bake, and again select that layer. And now I can already close Grasshopper, as we already have the elements that we want. So now, as I told you, we'll want these green areas in a second level. So what I'm going to do is to select them all and move them up. To select them all, now that they are juxtaposed with other information, because we isolated these elements in their own layer, what I can do is come to the layer, right-click it, and do Select Objects. And so now it has selected only the objects in that layer, and now I can do a Move command. It will ask me the point to move from, and in this case, what I'll do is move a specific height up. We could move any height that we wanted. We didn't need to put any specific measurement, but for the sake of showing you how you can do it, I'm going to do it here. And for me to have always a specific measurement between each of the levels. So when I do the move command, it asks me for a point to move from, so a reference point. In this case, I don't need any specific point. I'm just going to click here. You'll see that it will start to move in any direction. For the sake of moving it up correctly, I'm going to make sure that I have down here the ortho option connected, turned on, and I'll disconnect the smart track option. So turn on ortho and turn off smart track. In this way, it will be easier to choose the Z direction, as you'll see here. So I select that point, and now because I want to move it a specific measurement, what I'm going to do before clicking to where I want to move it, I'm going to write that value. So in this case, for the sake of it, I'm going to put 750, and you'll see that it starts to move that amount in any direction that I choose. So now all I have to do is choose, as you can see there, the line, choose the up direction, the Z axis, and just click in that direction, and it will move the amount that I wanted. So I've chosen this value because usually what I like to do is to have every level of my axonometry clearly defined and not juxtaposing like this the layer below. So I move just the amount needed to have that and still have a clear view of the elements. Obviously, in this case, you have some liberty, so you can juxtapose something like this a bit. So there's no problem there. You have some liberty to decide how you want to build your axonometry. If you want it more like this, or for example, rotate it more like this and move a little bit less up. Okay, so again, what I'm doing is serves more as reference. You can decide specific elements on your own. So I've moved my green areas up to the second level. What I could also do is move my trees if I wanted to include them in this level. I have them also set in their own layer. So what I can do is turn on that layer. You'll see that the trees are all they're already up here in this case, but if they were down here, you just have to select those objects according to the layer and move them the same amount up. But in this case, I've already set them up at this level. So now for the third level of our axonometry, what I'll want is to project the roads onto our terrain to also have them adapted to that surface. So we could project them, so literally do a project command and project the roads onto the surface of our terrain, but for the sake of making sure we don't have any errors, and because it's easier to cut surfaces with other surfaces instead of with lines, we're going to do another operation to do that. So the first thing that we'll want to do is to make a copy of our terrain to up here. So I'm going to turn on the layer that has our terrain, our original terrain. And because I'll want to preserve an original copy of our terrain here, I'm going to do a copy of this terrain. So I'm going to copy, and I'm going to do exactly the same that I did for my green areas. So I'm going to select a point of reference. In this case, I'm going to move twice the amount up. So I'm going to put, in this case, 1,500. Again, if you decide for another value, that's okay. So I've put the value, and now I'm moving according to Z. And because I only want one copy, after moving one instance up, I'm going to press Enter. So now I have my original terrain down here, and I have one copy of this terrain. So now, because I want to break this surface in apart from the original one, I'm going to put this new surface onto a new layer. So I'm going to create a new layer. And in this case, because we are going to work with the roads, I'm going to already call them, for example, main roads 3D. And now, if I want to move this surface to that new layer, I can just select the object and then come to the layer on which I want to put the object into, right-click that layer and do Change Object Layer. And you can see down here, now this object is in this new layer. So now to project the roads onto this surface, what I'm going to do is to select my main roads, which are in this layer. I'm going to right-click, do Select Objects. And now I'm going to do an operation called Extrude Curve. So I'm going to extrude these curves to create some auxiliary surfaces like this that will allow me to then trim the terrain as I want. So I extruded them just above this surface. And so now I'm going to divide the surface according to these extruded curves. So we have an operation, a few operations that we can do with sets of curves, which are called trim and splits. These are common to other programs, but so they allow you to divide some curves according to other referencing curves. In this case, you have the same operations for surfaces. And so they will be applied specifically to surfaces. They will be called mesh trim and mesh split. So in this case, we'll use the operation called mesh split, as we'll want to divide the terrain, but not delete any parts of the terrain. So we'll do a mesh split. And it asks us first for the object to split. So the object that we are going to divide. In this case, it will be our terrain. So I'll select my terrain and I'll press Enter. After that, it will ask me for the cutting objects. So in this case, it will be these surfaces that we extruded. So I'm going to drag over like this and select these objects and now press Enter. And it will take a bit but it will now split our terrain surface according to these extrusions. So now that it has completed the operation, let's check if it's okay. So I'll delete these extrusions. Now I'll zoom in and check. Apparently, they seem to be okay. So now what I'll do is select the surfaces between the roads and put them onto a new layer to now do the same, but with the secondary roads. Select all of these, all the surfaces between my main roads. Now I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call it, for example, secondary roads 3D. And now, to move this object to this layer, I'm going to right click it and do change object layer. So now if I want, I can turn off or lock the layer for the main roads in 3D. So now what I'll do is grab the roads that are here on the secondary roads layer, right click it, select objects, and I'm doing the same. So extrude curve. And to extrude just here. I'm doing the same operation before to match split the objects to split are going to be all the areas up here. So I can drag a window, or because I've put them on this layer, right click it, select objects, press enter, then cutting objects will be our extrusions. Enter again, and it will do the operation with these geometries. Was quicker because we had smaller areas. I'm going to delete these extrusions. I'm going to check if it did everything correct. So for example, we have here secondary roads that apparently wasn't well defined or extended until the limits, and so it wasn't able to create the surface for that road. So I'm going down here, I'm going just to check that line. So this seems to be a continuous line. Also this one, also this one. What we can do is we can check if the lines are extended onto their limits. So either in this side and in this one, they seem to be. But what we are going to do is close this road as a single element. So what I'm going to do, for example, here, I'm going to create a few lines just to close it here. I'm going to select all these lines and both of these, I'm going to do join. So in this way, it should be closed on this side. I'm going to do the same for these other sides. So I'm going also to grab a set of lines here, like so. I'm going to select this, all of these lines, and to join. And again, same here. So in this case, if we wanted, we could just, as we know that should be the only side that it's missing some closing lines. So there is an operation which is called close curve. So it will close on the open hand. So if we were to select this line that we joined so far, and we do close curve, it creates that line. For our purposes, it's enough. So now I'm going to do again the same operation. I'm going to select now this closed row that we did. I'm going to extrude curve. Here. Now I'm going to do the mesh split only to these surfaces here. So I'm going to do mesh split. The objects to split will be this. Press enter. Now the cutting objects will be these extrusions. Enter. Let's check if now we're able to do it. Still has some errors, apparently. So we can try to divide, for example, the terrain in smaller parts. We can check the curve again and do the operation again. Or we could eventually just leave this road and move on. I'm going to do an operation called also simplify curve. So there are a set of operations that we also did in some Grasshopper codes that we can also do in Rhino. So simplify curve will allow us to check if there are any elements juxtaposed or something like that. Apparently, there were not. So I'm going to do an operation called convert. I'm going to select this curve and convert it to arcs or polylines. So in this case, converted it, I'm going to move it again to this layer. Going again to try extrude this curve. Check if now I'm able to leave my terrain here. and hash split. Select areas, enter. Now my custom objects. This one, enter. Check. Now it was able to do it. Still no. Okay, so again, there might be some operations that you can try to make this a better curve to then extrude and divide our terrain. But for the sake of it, there is here an element that we should try to cut. But for the sake of the rest of the exercise, I'm just going to ignore this secondary road and continue on. So I'm going to now select all these areas between the secondary roads, as we might want them for a later exercise. So all these areas between now our secondary roads. And I'm putting them into separate layer instead of outright delete them. All of these areas. I'm going to create a new layer called, for example, remaining 3D areas. I'm going to change these objects to here. If I turn it off, I have here a secondary roads. Between areas. So these are basically secondary roads. Areas. Secondary roads 3D. So now, if I turn on my roads 3D, I have here all my roads adapted to right. If eventually you weren't able to extrude some of the roads, or you weren't able to divide the terrain according to them, at limits, what you could do is just move the roads from up here, from down here to up here. Okay, so if eventually you couldn't do this, what you could just do is select this, both of this, and move them up. So in this case, it won't be the measurement that we used because this was a little bit below the original terrain, but we could move about, for example, 1,650 or 1,700, something like that. So it would be basically the same amount as the other levels between one another. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to use this that I was able to do, but again, in your case, if you weren't able to do them properly, you could just move these objects up. So now we have already 3 layers of our axonometry. And now what I'll do is, for example, have the buildings on a separate layer, but also in every layer, just to have a referencing point in each of the layers. So we have the buildings on a specific layer also. They're already down here. I'm going to right-click it, do select objects, I'm going to copy them the several times that we have. So I'm going to copy them 750 up, then 1,500 up, and then just to have them separately up here, I'm going to copy. In this case, it will be 2,250 up, just to maintain the same proportion. And I'm going to press enter. So I'll have the buildings as referencing each of my layers. And now, also, as I told you, we're going to include also the intervention area in every layer. So what I'm going to do is going to, again, turn on my final terrain layer. But I'm going to, below the terrain, you see that with the roads, I have here the line for the intervention area selected. So just to make sure, because it's not closed, what I'm going to do again is a close curve. And it should close in that point, as you can see. So now I have this as a closed curve. And I'm going to do the same as we did for the roads. So I'm going to do extrude curve. I'm going to extrude to here. And I'm now splitting this terrain in two, between the rest of the terrain and the intervention area. So again, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call it, for example, intervention zone or area, as you may want to call it. So now I'm going to do the mesh split. I'm going to select my terrain, which is the object to split. I'm going to press enter, and now I'm going to select the extrusion, press enter. And if I delete the extrusion, now I should have the terrain divided between this part and the rest of it. So now I'm going to move this object to my new layer intervention zone. Now, as I did with the buildings, I'm going to copy it to each level of my axonometry. So I'm going to do copy. I'm going to select any referencing point. Now, again, the same measurements as before. So now what I have is my axonometry in all my different layers. If I put in the rendered view, you'll see I'll have the terrain with the contour lines here, then the green areas that for now are in white, then we'll have our buildings here, our roads here, and then finally just the buildings with the intervention area. So now what we'll want to do is to pick some materials for each of these elements. So for example, for our terrain, we can have a satellite image, or we can have just a simple white image of the terrain. So there are several images also on the website available to add to our file. So we have several different analyses and several different satellite images of our terrain. So what I'm going to do is to apply some of those images to these different elements. So basically we will do similar to what we did in the exercise where we applied the satellite image to our terrain, but to several different layers with several different images. So what I need, first of all, is our main square. As you remember, it will be the limit according to which we are going to apply the images. So it's in this layer, auxiliary. And now I'm going to, first of all, I should already have an image onto my final terrain in this case, but I have to reapply it. So the command is called apply planar mapping. I select my target object. In this case, it will be this terrain. I'll press enter. And now, for the sake of making sure everything is correctly applied, I'm going to select up here the option 3 points. And the 3 points in this case, having my file rotated like this, are going to be this corner, secondly, this corner, and thirdly, this corner. So to select this corner of the square, and this one, and finally this one. Then I'll select the option UV. I'll make sure I have as my mapping channel 1. And finally, I'll press enter. And if I put it in my rendered view, it should be correctly applied. Now I can do the same for intervention areas. I can apply specific image if I want. So what I'll do is come here to my intervention area layer. I'm going to apply an image as my material for that layer. So I click here in this little icon, the material subsection of my layers, and I'll change here the type to picture. And I'm going to select one of the pictures that is provided. In this case, I think I'll select this satellite image, but again, you can choose any of these images that are available. I'll select this image. I'll press OK. But now, as for the other one, we have to apply it correctly. So we are going to do apply planar mapping again. The target objects will be all the intervention areas in this case. So I'll just right-click the layer and do select objects, and it will select me all of the objects in my layer. I'll press enter. And again, as we did previously, we're going to select up here the 3 points option. We are going to define these 3 points of our square. UV 1 as the mapping channel, enter, and it should be applied. If we come to the rendered view, we should see that image applied to all our intervention areas. So next, we'll apply to the green areas. So again, as we have them in their own layer, we are going to that specific layer, green areas 3D in this case, and apply an image. You could also apply another material in this case, because they are the green areas, they don't need a specific image. So you could apply, for example, plaster material with another color that you could choose here. Okay. In my case, I'm going to also apply another image. I'm going to apply, for example, this one that shows the topography. The clearer areas are the lower areas, and the darker ones, the more elevated areas. I'm going to apply this image, and again, as we did previously, I'm going to do apply planar mapping. The target objects will be these green areas. Press enter. Again, 3 points. I'm going to select these 3 points from my square, UV, mapping channel 1, enter, and you should see the image applied. Again, you can change to another color or put another image here. So now for our roads, I'll apply another color instead of an image. So for our main roads, I'll come here to the material. What I'll do is change here the color, for example, to dark gray, as it is the main roads. I'll press OK, and you'll see the main roads with that color. Now for the secondary roads, I can apply also another color. So I'll apply, for example, one of these, which are also used in other layers, but again, you can choose whichever color you want. You can see the roads with one color and secondary ones with another. So here, this should be now for the buildings, because they are not showing very clearly on our axonometry. What I can do is also change the color of the building. So again, I'll come to the buildings layer, and I'll change the material for that layer. I'll put, for example, something like this. Now we can see more clearly our buildings. I can also change the color of my counter lines to see them more properly against the terrain, or I can change, for example, the image for the terrain. To try that, for example, change it to a simpler view. Delete this image. I'm going to open another. I'm going to apply, for example, this one that shows with a bit of shading the counter lines. So we'll be able to see a bit of the volume of our terrain. If I wanted, I could also change the color of my counter lines. So now I have all my layers with different images applied. I could turn on my trees. We would see the 3D trees in our green areas layer. So we have all of our areas for the axonometry. So now the only thing that we'll want to do, in this case, we'll do it simply, is taking screenshots of each face. So for example, taking a screenshot of this part of our axonometry, then moving it down, taking another screenshot of this part of the axonometry, moving it down again, and so on, taking another screenshot, and then another one, and then in the end, just on Paint or in PowerPoint, you can just mount the images and connect them in order to do our full axonometry. So for example, could come here to print like this. Down. do this. And in the end, we just connect all these different snapshots of my axonometry in order to do my final one. And that's it for this exercise.